Okay, recording is started. And here it is.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, then we formally start. So welcome everybody. This is the first ever webinar arranged in a collaboration between the European Reference Network and the European Huntington Association. And it's really amazing that in these very special times, we have this opportunity to connect at least virtually and online. Because we realize that many of you out there may feel quite isolated. There's just one thing I want to make you aware of before we start. And if you take the next slide, Sanya, if you want to make sure that you are staying anonymous, because when you logged in, you were asked to give your email and your name. But if you don't want that to be stored by Zoom, I'm not fully aware of what they do with the information they collect. You can just log out. And then when you log in again, you just make up Minnie Mouse, Gmail, whatever, and a name, and then you log back in. Then you will make sure that nobody knows who you are behind that name you have made up. So in this, while this COVID-19 situation emerged and we realized that that caused a lot of stress on families in general, and maybe also for Huntington families in particular, we came up with the idea together with the European Reference Network that we could reach out to you and organize this in order to enable you to get in touch with experts and ask them any questions or raise any concerns you may have. And I'm really happy to have this panel of 16 experts. If you show the slide, Sanya, you can see the names. You have here a list of 16 names with people from different backgrounds and different countries. And they are all here. They all agreed when I asked them in a very short notice, they agreed to be here for you to respond to your questions and things you want to raise with them. And actually, this group of people, of experts, they represent more than 20 languages. So on this map, you can see the countries in languages we will together be able to respond to. For this webinar, after I've said my introduction and welcome, Sanya Hermans, my colleague in the European Reference Network, will demonstrate to you very briefly how the question and answer options work for you. Because as participant, you can only write your comments or questions. And after we have had a presentation of all the panelists, Bernhard Landwehrmeyer will give a short intro about what may be the specific risks for HD patients related to the COVID-19 virus, and also give us a very short update on the status of the Huntington trials and studies, like Enroll HD, for instance, how they are influenced by the crisis in the health systems in many countries. And then Professor Hugh Richards, psychiatrist from England, will give us some input on how challenges can be experienced and how to relate to that for HD patients and families. And then we will open up and allow you to comment and give questions, and we will discuss with the panelists relevant issues that is brought up by you. Please, Sanya, can you show us how the webinar works? You are on mute, Sanya. We cannot hear you.
Yes. Hi. Okay, so just to repeat that you're muted and your videos are off, but you can ask your question either through the chat box or through the Q&A box. So those functions you can see on the lower toolbar if you go in in your window and you hover over it, you will see in the lower toolbar those 3 buttons, and you can already write there your questions. We would prefer if there are general questions asked in the Q&A box and questions asked to the particular panelists in your native language in the chat box. So if you use the chat box, you can choose by clicking on the small arrow here if you like to ask that question to all of the 16 or 17 panelists or to the panelists and the attendees. And then write your questions and press enter. And if you like to use the Q&A box, then please write your question here. And if you would like to send it anonymously, just tick that box and then send. And that's it. And we will go through the questions during the webinar, so after the presentations, and answer those incoming questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's go back to the list with the experts, and then we have an introduction.
Yes.
So I know that Professor Bernhard Landwehrmeyer was a bit delayed. I'm not sure if he's here now.
Hopefully, I'm here. Hopefully you can see me now.
Okay,
can you
welcome.
See me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Bernhard.
Perfect. Thanks.
So please, just a very short intro of yourself.
All right. So my name is Bernhard Landwehrmeyer. I'm a neurologist based in Ulm, Germany. I used to chair the executive committee of the European EHDN network for the first 10 years, and I'm the principal investigator of Enroll HD and involved in many clinical trials in Huntington's disease.
Thank you.
Should I repeat this in German? Or
yes, please. Yes, please. Please.
Also, mein Name ist Bernhard Landwehrmeyer, ich bin Neurologe in Ulm. Ich war beteiligt an der Gründung des Europäischen Huntington-Netzwerks und bin der leitende und Verantwortliche für die Enroll HD-Studie weltweit und beteiligt an sehr vielen klinischen Medikamentenprüfungen.
Thank you, Bernhard. Alsbeta?
Yes, I'm here. Hello, I'm Alsbeta Mulbeck. I'm a neuropsychiatrist based in Germany, but I come from Slovakia. Takže ja som Alžbeta Mulbeck, pochádzam zo Slovenska, žijem v Nemecku, ale touto cestou sa rada prihovorím všetkým pacientom z Čech a zo Slovenska. Kľudne mi píšte otázky cez chat alebo cez osobne, alebo už cez FAA. Ďakujem.
Thank you very much. I saw that also Ann-Kathrin, you joined us. Can you please give a short presentation of yourself? Ann-Kathrin, are you on mute? Okay, I cannot hear you, Ann-Kathrin. I go to Hugh Rickards.
Hello, everybody. I'm Hugh Rickards. I'm a neuropsychiatrist based in the UK, and I have about 400 patients with Huntington's disease, and I'm managing 400 patients mainly in isolation with Huntington's disease at the moment. That's the challenge. Thank you.
Thank you. Yuri.
Hello, my name is Yuri Silverstov. I'm a neurologist based in Russia, Moscow. I'm a movement disorder specialist, and I also work with patients with Huntington's disease, and I'm involved in some clinical trials on HD. Всем добрый день, меня зовут Юрий Селиверстов, я являюсь неврологом и работаю в Москве. Я веду в том числе пациентов с болезнью Гантингтона и участвую в ряде клинических исследований по этому заболеванию. Спасибо.
Thank you so much. Ann-Kathrin, now I saw you. Can you give a short presentation on it for yourself?
Oui, I'm coordinating the National Center for Huntington's Disease in France. I'm running quite some clinical trials in gene therapy and transplant and course, obviously. And at the moment, we are running together the COVID patients and the Huntington disease patients, and try to help everybody as we can. And in French, it will be je coordonne le Centre national de Huntington en France, et on essaye actuellement de gérer les patients Covid et les patients Huntington, et ceux qui ont les deux, heureusement il n'y en a pas beaucoup, et on n'oublie personne, et on travaille actuellement par téléconsultation pour tous les patients Huntington de France qui sont suivis chez nous. I should say that in English. We also are consulting every patient by teleconsultation at the moment in Huntington disease, so it's done. We are on the way.
Okay. Thank you so much. Natalia from Bulgaria.
Hello everyone, I'm Natalia Grigorova and I'm the chairman of Bulgarian Huntington Association, and also I'm a psychologist. So I will be here ready to answer your questions regarding your psychical and emotional health during this difficult situation. So please feel free and send me your questions. You can do this also privately, just to me in English and in Bulgarian, of course. Здравейте на всички, аз съм Наталия Григорова и съм председател на Българска Хантингтън асоциация. Също така съм и психолог. Ще бъда тук, за да отговоря на всичките ви въпроси, които са свързани с вашето психично и емоционално здраве по време на тази тежка за всички ситуация. Така че, моля ви, чувствайте се свободни да ми задавате вашите въпроси, като това може да го направите и в индивидуален чат с мен. Така че ще чакам да ми пишете. Благодаря. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And then Filipa from Portugal.
Hi, I'm Filipa Julio from Portugal. I'm a neuropsychologist and a EHDN member. I'm also a board member of the European and of the Portuguese Huntington Association, and I also help with HD buzz and HDYO sites. I'm very happy to be part of this webinar, and I hope that we can reach and help as many HD families as possible. Olá, o meu nome é Filipa Júlio, sou de Portugal, sou neuropsicóloga, faço parte da direção da Associação Huntington Europeia e Portuguesa, ajudo também com as traduções do site HD Buzz e HDYO, e estou muito contente por fazermos esta iniciativa e espero que consigamos chegar ao maior número de famílias possível.
Thank you so much. Judith from Hungary.
Hi, good afternoon to everybody. My name is Maria Judith Molnár. I am neurologist, psychiatrist, and clinical geneticist, and I am leading the Institute of Genomic Medicine and Rare Disorders at the Semmelweis University. We are taking care about more than 100 patients with Huntington disease. And we are the part of the ERN, Rare Neurological Disorders, and we are very happy to participate here in this webinar. Molnár Mária Judit vagyok, neurológus, pszichiáter, klinikai genetikus, a Semmelweis Egyetemen a Genomikai Medicina és Ritka Betegségek Intézetének a vezetője vagyok. Az intézetünk a tagja az Európai Ritka Betegségek Hálózatában, a Ritka Neurológiai Betegségek hálózatának, és nagyon örülök, hogy részt vehetünk ezen a webináron.
Thank you so much. And then we have Dr. José.
Hi everyone. I'm Dr. Lopez-Endon, José Lopez-Endon from Madrid. I'm a neurologist working in Huntington disease. We are participating in Enroll and several clinical trials in Huntington's disease. But currently most of the doctors are working on COVID. So I hope I can be some help for you. Hola a todo el mundo, soy José López-Endón, neurólogo en el Hospital Ramón y Cajal de Madrid. Soy experto en enfermedad de Huntington, participamos en proyectos europeos y en ensayos clínicos y actualmente el hospital prácticamente está completamente dedicado a tratar la crisis del coronavirus. Espero seros de ayuda.
Thank you so much. And then we have Lasse from Norway.
Yes, hello, I'm Lasse Pilström. I'm a neurologist and researcher. I'm responsible for the Huntington's disease clinic at Oslo University Hospital. Jeg heter Lasse Pilström og lege og forsker og ansvarlig for Huntington-klinikken ved Oslo universitetssykehus, nevrologisk avdeling.
Tack ska du ha. Ramona, Romania. Are you there, Ramona?
Unmute. Hi, everyone. My name is Ramona Moldovan. I'm a clinical psychologist and a genetic counselor, and over the last 10 years, I worked with HD families in Romania and more recently in the UK as well. Bună ziua! Numele meu este Ramona Moldovan, sunt consilier genetic și psiholog clinician și în ultimii 10 ani am lucrat în domeniul Huntington în România și am fost implicată și în alte studii în Marea Britanie. Și sunt aici să traduc orice fel de întrebări sau informații aveți nevoie.
Thank you so much. Violetta from Poland.
Yes, hello. My name is Violetta Krysa. I am a biologist and molecular geneticist. I used to work at the Institute of Psychiatry and Neurology. I performed their molecular testing for HD in Poland, and I am a Polish HD Association member. Dzień dobry, nazywam się Violetta Krysa, jestem genetykiem molekularnym. Byłam związana z Instytutem Psychiatrii i Neurologii w Warszawie. Wykonywałam badania genetyczne w kierunku choroby Huntingtona i jestem członkinią stowarzyszenia. Dziękuję.
Thank you. Nando from Italy.
Hi, my name is Ferdinando Squitieri. I'm a neurologist based in Rome and working on Huntington disease since 1984. I'm head of a Huntington unit at Casa Sollievo della Sofferenza Research Hospital and co-founder of Italian League for Research on Huntington Foundation. I'm also principal investigator of Enroll, HD, Clarity and Generation HD1. Il mio nome è Ferdinando Squitieri, a Roma, responsabile dell'unità Huntington di Casa Sollievo della Sofferenza e Mendel, cofondatore e responsabile scientifico di Lega Italiana Ricerca Huntington, principal investigator per i progetti Enroll, HD Clarity e Generation HD1.
Thank you so much. And Dirk from Belgium. Dirk, are you there? I cannot hear you.
Sorry, I was on mute.
Exactly.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dirk Lisses. I'm a psychiatrist, and I work in the university clinic, psychiatric clinic in Bierbeek, which is a center of excellence for people with brain injuries and, of course, with Huntington's disease. We work closely with the lay organization and with the University of Leuven. And we've been working especially on emotional, neurocognitive, executive and behavior disturbances in Huntington's disease. Mijn naam is Dirk Lisses, ik ben psychiater. Ik werk in Sint-Camillus in Bierbeek, een psychiatrische kliniek die gespecialiseerd is voor cognitieve, executieve, emotionele en gedragsproblemen bij mensen met de ziekte met Huntington en hun families. En we werken nauw samen met de Liga van Huntington en met het departement neurologie van de universiteit in Leuven. Dank u. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Last but not least, Marina from Cyprus.
Hello, everybody. My name is Marina Pavlou. I'm a social worker. I'm working in the Cyprus Institute of Neurology and Genetics and with people with HD and their families. And also I'm a member of the committee of Cyprus Disease Association of Cyprus. Γεια σας, είμαι η Μαρίνα Παύλου. Θα ήθελα σήμερα να μιλήσουμε μαζί, αν μπορείτε, για τα θέματα που απασχολούν την κοινότητα. Είμαι πρόθυμη να ακούσω τις ερωτήσεις σας. Κοινωνική λειτουργός του Ινστιτούτου Νευρολογίας.
Thank you so much. So this is all the experts, but first we will please welcome Bernhard Landwehrmeyer to say something about Huntington's disease in relation to COVID-19 and what may be the specific things to be aware of in that. Please, Bernhard.
Right. Can you all hear me and see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, everybody? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, perfect, perfect. So what I'm going to do is briefly discuss with you the context, in the context of Huntington's disease, COVID-19. What I'm going to talk about is, first, I'm giving you a short introduction about the SARS-CoV-2 virus and the COVID-19 pandemic. And then I'm going to discuss with you, and this is intended to be an introduction into our joint discussion, the direct impact of the SARS-CoV-2 infection in HD patients. So I'm going to discuss briefly the risks of getting infected, the risk of having a clinically severe infection or a severe adult respiratory syndrome or SARS, the risk of requiring admission to an intensive care unit or ICU, the risk of death, and then very importantly, the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic that is indirect on HD patients and their families. And Yu, in his presentation, is going to follow up on this. So let's start with a few introductory comments. As we all know, the SARS-CoV-2 virus is an RNA virus, so a ribovirus, with single-stranded RNA, and resulted in this pandemic that's today's Johns Hopkins map, global map. We are all looking at it on a daily basis. And the numbers, as we are all aware, are staggering. We are all aware that there's a spectrum of outcomes as a result of a SARS-CoV-2 infection. There are some people, I don't know whether you can see my cursor. Can you see my cursor at all? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. There are some cases who are clinically asymptomatic. Then there is a relatively large proportion of people who do have symptoms and signs, but they are mild. The estimate is up to 80% that belong in the first two categories. But then there are severe cases presenting with adult respiratory syndrome, and a certain proportion of people, very sadly, will die from the infection. And that's, of course, something that is on everybody's mind. What is the case fatality ratio? And the most important thing that we need to keep in mind in our discussions concerning HD is that it is highly age dependent, or in other words, there's a strong age gradient in risk of death. It's hard for you to see, I guess, but this is what was published last week in Lancet Infectious Disorders. Here, drawing on the experience in China, the estimated fatality rate, and you can clearly see that there is a big difference depending on age, below 60 and above 80. That's displayed here in yet a different way. In Wuhan, where the problem started, you see that the age distribution of people infected was skewed towards higher ages. That contrasts to the rest of China that typically had somewhat younger population. And you can see here in this part of the graph that there is a very high dependence of the likelihood of death on age. You can see here that in the larger than 80 years of age group, the fatality rate is 50% or above. That implies that for all of us, there may be dark days ahead because we are just in the beginning of it. Let us have a quick view of the people who we lost to the coronavirus already. The person who coined and defined the term severe adult respiratory syndrome is an American, and he died 2 weeks ago in Paris at the age of 92. This lady, Hilda Churchill, who is from the greater Manchester area, and survived the 1918 pandemic and died at the age of 108 in her nursing home. This gentleman, the last surviving veteran of the Spanish Civil War, who helped to liberate Paris died of coronavirus and, the day before yesterday. And this physician is an Italian family physician, general medicine, practicing near Milano, and he died at the age of 67. This gentleman, many of you know, he, in contrast to the people that I showed to you before, died early, already at the age of 33. He is the Chinese ophthalmologist who warned the public and was reprimanded for this, and for alerting everybody to an impending pandemic. And the reason why he died in all likelihood is that he got exposed to a high dose of the virus. That's another important lesson to consider. High dose of exposure to the virus implies higher risk. This gentleman died even earlier at the age of 30, but he, despite being young, had a comorbid conditions, an autoimmune disorder, myasthenia gravis, and he received immune suppressive treatment. As we are all very much aware, the big challenge is that depending on the region, you have a varying capacity of the healthcare system. And what we are all trying to do is to adjust, and that's not the same across the board. It highly depends on the region. The number of infected cases and the number of people with severe infections and who require hospital treatment and potentially ICU treatment to the capacity. That's a big, big, big challenge. And we are all struggling with this currently. And it's clearly not the same depending on the region. That's the problem. That's how it looked like in Bergamo, for instance. And that's the problem that is overwhelming the healthcare system. We all are aware of measures to limit the spread, the most important being, of course, distancing and not exposing people once you are infected. But I think the important point that we are going to discuss a little bit later is that this need, this really an important need for physical distancing doesn't imply that that people should be by themselves and isolated and in a social sense while maintaining physical distance. So let's quickly discuss the direct impact on the SARS-CoV-2 on HD patients. So let's start with the various points. Risk of getting infected.
Excuse me, Bernhard, I just want to interrupt you 1 second. Can the panelists, all of you, mute? Except for Bernhard. Ann-Kathrin, Marina, I can see that you are not muted, and sound gets into and disturbs the participants.
Mm-hmm. Right. Thanks, Astri.
Sorry, continue.
No problem. So direct impact, and so risk of getting infected. I'm interested to learn what the various panelists think about this. My opinion is that the risk of getting infected, if you happen to be an HD expansion mutation carrier, is essentially no different from other folks in your region and in your locality. The risk of having a clinically severe infection, or SARS, is primarily determined by factors that apply to the general population. That is age, and likewise the risk of requiring admission to the ICU and the risk of death. Clearly, and what is an important consideration in addition is the clinical stage that you're in as an HD patient. It's important to realize that HD patients are not by default immunocompromised. We're not talking people with cancer. We are not talking people who are on immunosuppressive treatment in general. But depending on stage, clearly you are at risk of lung infections, mostly because of aspiration, dysphagia, the results of dysphagia, and the complications of you lying in bed. So it is impactful, but in a stage-dependent fashion, whether you have or do not have an HD. What potentially is even more relevant in daily life, and many of us feel this today, is that there is an impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on both the HD patients as well as the family. The indirect impact implies that there is a limited access to HD centers. And for safety reasons, you don't want to expose yourself, and because the HD centers may have more restricted opening and practice times in comparison to normal conditions. In addition, the HD centers may not be at full capacity. In various regions, in the UK, and Spain, Italy, medical personnel, physicians, nurses, and co-therapists were redeployed from their normal job, that is, doing neurology and attending to patients in HD clinics, to fight the corona emergency. So, for instance, I talked on Sunday with Sarah. All of her fellows, including herself, are now corona doctors. And it's Sarah and Daniela Ray who try on the side to also stay in touch with HD affected, associated with their London center. So that's of big impact. In addition, many of the co-therapies that people are used to, physical therapy, speech therapy, and many of the counseling services are either no longer available currently, or have limited capacity for good reasons. Physical therapy implies that you're in close proximity to patients that may pose them at risk, that may pose a risk to the therapists. And very important too, there is a reduced support for HD families for economic reasons. A lot of the services that HD families and HD patients grew accustomed to are dependent on donations and on HD associations. There is no donation currently. There is no service available, and to the extent that in a given region, social support for HD family is dependent on these voluntary donations, they are severely constrained currently. At the same time, and I think that's important to stress, all these challenges, also opportunities. We need to try to compensate for the services that are no longer available currently within the families, and by us as physicians, to extent that we can still run HD clinics, can do so. For instance, there is pressure to speed up the deployment of telemedicine options. Physical distance is embodied, if you like, by telemedicine, and yet by being able to see people via video and listening to their voices allows you to continue to provide care, and that may offer opportunities for the days to come as well. So, I like this quote from the former president of Estonia. The situation may be shit, but it's our fertilizer for the future. So, with no doubt, this is a grave and serious situation we are all in, and let's just hope that all the measures that are currently taken yield in a controllable number of cases. But that's also planting the seed for what is next. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Bernhard. We will open up for questions, and people are posting some questions already. But I guess maybe you touched very briefly upon it, but this has also some consequences for the ongoing studies in Huntington. Can you say, can you elaborate a little bit on that?
I can. I mean, I even have a short presentation on this. So it's a really short presentation. You will see. So, what is how does the pandemic influence ongoing HD trials and studies? And we will have an opportunity to discuss it because it varies from region to region. But there's one bottom line: it's bad. And how bad it is depends on region and local circumstance. And that is what we need to discuss, I hope, during the next half hour or so.
Yes, okay, thank you. So the consequences differ obviously from country to country based on how stressed the health system is, or if they are able to continue more or less like normal. Okay, thank you so much. Then I think I will, I'm aware of the time, so I will pass the word to Hugh Rickards. And you should stop sharing, Bernhard, to allow, I don't know if it has a presentation. Thank you, yes.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Is the sound quality okay?
We can hear you just fine.
Yes.
Everybody's nodding. That's good. I'm presenting from my daughter's bedroom because this is the new reality. She's now grown up, and but I've discovered her old teddy bears here. So I thought I'd put them on the side there to illustrate the new reality of our clinical lives. This is my current office, and I'm doing all my consultations via telemedicine and talking to my team via telemedicine. And I agree with what Bernhard said about it being fertilizer for the future, because some really good things have come out of this. I've been asked by Astri to talk about what's happening to families and how families are coping and how people with HD are coping. And this is my experience of the last 2 weeks, really, because it's thrown up all sorts of things, quite a lot of which you'd probably predict, but not all of which you'd predict. I guess the first thing to say is that people with HD like a routine. They like to know what's happening next, and they like to know what time it's happening, and they usually get a little bit irritated if it's not like the routine. And of course, this is a massive change in routine for everybody. So that's really unsettling all round. There's another issue in relation to that, in that people with Huntington's disease find it difficult to control impulses and to do strategic planning. And there's another group of people that find those two tasks difficult, and those are children and adolescents. And now children and adolescents are no longer at school or playing out. They're all at home with the person with HD, and that can lead to quite a lot of problems. And that's what we're seeing really at the moment, is these changes in routine and the extra people in the house, particularly if space outside is limited, are causing more upsets, more irritability. And managing that usually falls to one person, and the person is, in most cases in families, the spouse, who has to deal with that and to project manage that. What I've been saying to spouses, and what I've been discussing with spouses quite a lot, is finding a way of creating a small nest within the house where the person with HD can have as much routine as possible within a small space. Because the other, I suppose, the advantage for a lot of people with HD is that if routine is good and you can preserve routine and you say yes to things and provide the things that the person with HD wants at the time that they want in a timely manner, then many people with HD in this situation can be quite happy and settled, and they might not need a lot of things, just so long as the things are routine and when they say they're going to be there. So because the other problem is with the adolescents and the spouse, that's a time when everybody's together, and that highlights some of the more family dynamic issues to do with accepting a person with HD in the family. So there's so many examples of that. I'm having to deal with a young man at the moment who's about 25, 26, and all his brothers and sisters at home and he wants to come downstairs and watch pornography in the living room. And that's leading to a whole series of problems, as you might imagine. And normally it's just him and his mum, and she's found a way of managing it, but now there's 4 other people in the house, so that's problematic. So that's problem number 1. Problem number 2, which is something that is in a significant minority of cases, is people with HD who don't understand or who don't really want to obey the social distancing rules. This is particularly problematic if there's a vulnerable and elderly person in the house. So in a number of cases, we have, it's common, you have a person with HD and their routine is every day they go for a wander down the local high street, and they go to cafes and they speak to people. That will be what they do every day. And certainly at the beginning of the lockdown, then a lot of these people still carried on doing that. They go out the front door despite other people saying not to, and wander down the local high street and maybe not find anything there, or find some people they can talk to. And so managing people with HD who don't understand the lockdown rules or who don't understand the need to obey them is particularly difficult, I think. And our local Huntington's Association have provided some guidance about that. But I guess that sometimes that requires the spouse, usually it's the spouse if there is one, to take more coercive action, for instance, speaking to the local police. And that can be a really difficult situation to manage. So those are some of the things that we're managing. The third thing is, which I've alluded to before, really is the pressure on the spouse, if there is a spouse or a main caregiver, because that person is having to deal with all their own anxieties about what happens if I get ill, what happens if one of the children gets ill, what happens if the person with Huntington's disease gets ill, how are we going to manage, how am I going to manage the children, how am I going to manage the person with HD who might be rule breaking or irritable about change in circumstance. So I guess it's the pressure on the spouse that's enormous. And a lot of the things that we end up doing in our video consultations is having a quiet conversation, a private conversation with the spouse, who is basically project managing the whole thing in almost every case. The other thing that's highlighted to me, and which we're seeing a little bit more of, and I guess we'll probably see more still, is when those problems escalate to the level of domestic abuse, because that has occurred already. And I know it's a difficult subject to talk about, but at the same time, that's a real subject that's already started occurring more commonly than normal for obvious reasons. And so having to deal with that whilst at the same time understanding that social services are really stretched at the moment, and the associations are stretched because the Huntington's charities are really stretched at the moment. That's particularly difficult. So I guess those are the main issues that we've come up with in the last 3 weeks. If I was just to make one other point, and this is a plea to anybody listening, including all the expert panelists, which is to say that Huntington's associations, like other charities around the world, are really suffering at the moment. And that's because they usually make their money from people running around fields and jumping out of airplanes and having rock concerts and goodness knows what. And that has all stopped now. On top of that, then their investments, which are their backup, really have suffered on the stock market too. So a lot of Huntington's associations worldwide are really struggling. I'm going to make a plea to colleagues, professional colleagues, which is, right, this is my challenge to you, which is this year you've put a certain amount of your personal budget aside for going to conferences and traveling, accommodation, subsistence, airplanes, all that sort of thing. I know your institutions will pay for some of it, but I reckon what you should do after this, go home, look at your bank account, work out how much money you are going to spend on that, and then go to your bank and transfer that amount to your local Huntington's Association in whichever country you come from, or the EHA, whichever you prefer, because these people really need your money now to keep going more than ever. So that's my challenge. That's it. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Hugh. I really just want to make the panelists aware of the Q&A and encourage you to see if some of you can respond to some of those comments and things that's been coming up there.
And then I would like to ask you in general if you have any additional things you would like to comment on related to the situation based on what we've heard now from Bernhard or from Hugh, or based on your own experience in dealing with Huntington patients or family members.
Hi, Astri. I don't know whether you can see me or hear me.
We cannot see you, Anne-Catherine, so please turn on your camera. That would be nice.
If I could, it doesn't work anymore.
Okay.
We can hear you,
Okay,
we can hear you. Then just talk.
Okay. So the fact is that I wouldn't say that everything is blocked, because we are really dealing with the two types of patients. The COVID was in one part of the department and the other one in the other part. And in fact, what we start to do is to send to the patient YouTube videos for exercise, or we make movies to help them to know how to sit, how to deal with the disease. We are now starting a teaching course, Facish one, so it will start next week for the patients at home. And we are all working by telemedicine. So it's totally feasible. It's not perfect. Nobody will say that. But the question is to say that to the patient and to the family that they are not alone. So they still are consulting with psychologists of the department. So they call, then we call them back. We have videos to call them. And I think all this stuff can work. And there is thousands of things in YouTube and internet. We have to collect them and send them. I hope next week to send you a Facebook page, which is public, which will be in French, but with videos that you will be able to use and maybe to translate if you wish to, with some exercise for Huntington disease patients. So there is things to do. And the association tries to respond by phone, because phone still exists. You don't have to have internet. You can call. You can phone to your doctor, to your psychologist, and to anybody. So I think we are not in a situation without any techniques. We have a lot of techniques. Just use them and simplify them so the patient could get them. So I wouldn't say it's excellent, because we are dealing every day with COVID patients, but we are also dealing with Huntington patients. We didn't stop the activity, so they don't come, because we only accept emergencies, but if there is an emergency, we will accept them, even if they are COVID negative. So they must say that the hospital is still working, even for them. They're not forgot.
Thank you.
And this is important.
Thank
you,
you,
Anne-Catherine. Could you extend a little bit on whether you're still able to conduct clinical trials at your center?
No. We stop enroll. We stop prepare HD2, but we continue for the patient who wish to come, generation HD. But for the one who are living far in some zone of France where the virus is less prominent, is exactly what you told, than in Paris. In Paris, we have a lot of amount of patients with COVID, so we are the worst part of France now. So the one who are living far from us are not coming because it's frightening for them, and Roche has accepted that they cancel their visit. But for the one living in Paris, they just come. And we still are continuing the protocol. So it's really dependent from the region and from the patients. But we are still available for that. But only of the therapeutic trial, nothing observational. Only what could be useful to the patient. This is the rule.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else who has some comments based on maybe some of the experience you've had lately?
Just out of interest, so Jose, could you comment how it's like in Madrid, and could we just go around the countries just to get a sense what is still possible and what is in a given region and in the given city now confined to phone contacts, as Anne-Catherine alluded to, which I completely agree are extremely important and potentially supplemented with video calling. So, Jose, would you mind?
Yeah, well, here in Madrid, as you all are very much aware, we are having a very difficult situation. The things are improving currently, but for the last 4 weeks, it has been very, very tough. We closed the outpatient clinics completely for the last month. It's been 4 weeks. I haven't seen a patient in the outpatient clinics. The clinical trials facilities are open for specific trials that have been considered of importance, and the Generation HD is open. Here in my site in Madrid, some other sites in Spain have completely closed clinical trials, and I am considering on an individual basis calling the patients to ask if they feel that it's safe for them to come to the hospital, depending on several factors such as age or companions. So we have canceled some visits, but we are going on in most of the visits. Most of the patients feel that it's safe for them to come. We are giving them protection when they arrive at the hospital, and we are having some specific measures such as mask and all these you are very much aware of. And I think it's very, very, very important to try to keep the trial alive, because it has been a great effort. I believe that it's only going to be a few months, and I think that we should all consider to make an effort and try to keep the trial alive. Also, I would like to ask all of the panelists, what's your opinion regarding the patient coming to the hospital to have a visit? What would you recommend them?
I would like to just answer to this question. If you could see me this time. Yes?
Yes, we can.
We had a very strong discussion with the people from infection, because we are an hospital for emergency, and we have a lot of COVID patients. Half of the hospital is with COVID patients, and the other half, I should say, 2/3 is with COVID patients and 1/3 without. And clearly, it appears that it's quite dangerous for patients for traveling for only observational studies, because they are supposed to be told in a ethical review board as without direct benefit from the patient. So being in a place where you know there is a lot of COVID patients for a study without direct benefit is considered as non-ethical. That's why we stopped them, and we only continue the one with a beneficial formed patients. That means the one with a therapeutic trial. That's it.
So in part, I would like to respond to your question, Jose. And I think it depends on circumstance. So we have our HD clinic outside the main hospital. So we make sure that there is only one participant plus the people they live with anyway at a given time in the waiting room. So we minimize risk and exposure, but that's a lucky circumstance for the time being. And so we can continue currently the Generation HD1 dosing, and believe that we should be in touch with people over the phone. I think that's important. How is this like for you, Nando? How do you deal with it?
Yes, thanks, Bernhard, for asking. Yeah, as you know, as everybody knows, Italy is living a quite hard time. It's a very tough time. One of the difficulties we are dealing with is, in my opinion, related also to the organization and political organization of Italy, because we are shared in regions. And of course, the distance from the centers makes a difference, because we need to deal with the different regulation of each region. So when a person or patient moves from an area in Italy to another area, needs to certify everything about trips and reasons to travel. And of course, everything is now open just for urgency and emergency. So also outpatient clinics at present in most health structures and hospital is just open for emergency. And also, at least in Italy, to my knowledge, most of the sites are not working and just stopped for a clinical trial, at least for some clinical trials. One chance, like Anne-Catherine stated, and I agree with that, that's a good advice, and we should think about that, is that it's important to try to separate areas where patients with lung disease may access from other areas of the hospital. Perhaps, for example, in my own experience, this is a good chance because in my main hospital where we work in San Giovanni Rotondo, we have a separate area from the rest of the hospital, as well as in Rome. But anyway, I guess, this is my opinion, of course, at least by now, everything is absolutely unpredictable because we are just in the position to observe what is happening with the peaks and with the numbers of COVID infections in our country. And so we need to just wait to look at what is happening, what will happen in the near future.
I think maybe we can state that in general, the clinics who have participants in Enroll HD or Generation HD1, which is the most relevant ones for Europe, they will note their participants about the status if they are able to decide if they should come or stay home or how to do things, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the guidance is whatever is possible safely under given local circumstance. I think that's the bottom line. So could I ask how it is like in the UK? The UK has been hard hit too. So you are, could you comment as well, or Ramona, how it's like in Birmingham and Manchester?
Yeah, I can say for Birmingham, at the moment, our research and development department has effectively closed all studies that are not COVID-19 studies. So that also includes cancer studies. So I'm unable to operate as a PI without any R&D department. So yeah, I'm hoping that won't delay visits particularly, because I guess that'll only be for a short period of time. But yeah, I think what we're going to have to do is return to what's called standard of care for a period of time and then go back. I don't know about the other sites though.
Okay, I think I would like to go to one of the Q&A comments or questions really, because I think it's relevant for many families. Here it's stated, how can I take care of my HD patient due to the isolation and curfew, which is hindering me from taking her to gym or getting her to physiotherapist or speech therapy or even going out. She feels very down and starting to lose interest. I know that, for instance, Philippa, maybe others of you have been in touch with families who deal with these struggles. Can you maybe comment something?
The idea, in fact, we have many families reaching out with similar cases, and on the opposite side, as Hugh said, really with many complaints about irritability and even domestic violence going up. So the idea for us, an association, what we are trying to do, because we feel that, again, one of the biggest problems here also has to do with information and misinformation. So all the official information about physical activity at home, psychological help at home, and so on, we pass that on to the families. So for them to at least have the resources, staying home, but having the same resources and trying to engage especially the spouses and the husbands. Another thing is to, as again Hugh said, trying to create a kind of routine situation and also with things to engage the patient that is becoming more apathetic in trying to include that or new things into a routine sort of new situation at home. So physical activity and emotional help and talking, I think, are the main things, and it's feasible to have that at home. At least there are resources, and the web is a brave new world. So it gives you everything to do that.
And isn't the fact that people are forced to spend more time together also an opportunity? I'm not implying that it's not without challenges, that you have to entertain each other or bear each other and with no real escape. But isn't it also an opportunity to rethink what you can do, and whether it would be wise to do, let's say, physical therapy together, motivating the HD person in the family, because everybody is doing it out of necessity. I mean, I'm not trying to beautify a bad situation, but I'm implying that maybe this is something where people have to start to think about opportunities that otherwise wouldn't present themselves.
Thank you.
I wonder
Bernhard, sorry, Astri, there are also two questions. I would say they are related to what Bernhard has presented in the chat box, so not to forget those. So the first one is HD patients are not immune compromised, but from recent studies show an increased innate immune response. What is now known from COVID is that one of reasons patients develop SARS is a cytokine explosion in the patient. So may HD patients in later stages be at a higher risk?
All right, that's a very insightful question, but I don't think we know the answer to this at this point in time, to be quite frank. And it's true that it is felt that the poor course of many elderly people first exposed to a novel infective agent has to do with their immune system being overreactive. And it's true that there's evidence for a somewhat increased antibody production in general in HD patients, and a different sensitivity and stimulatability of the innate immune system as a consequence of the HD mutation themselves. Whether that reaches a level and a threshold that in a measurable way alters the course, the natural course of a COVID infection, I believe is not known at this point in time. So I think it's an important consideration, but to my mind, or at least I'm not aware of any data that would speak to that question. So I would, for the time being, favor the view that that is a possibility, but not something where we can instantly act on or in some way change the way we treat a SARS-CoV-2 infected person with HD from a normal person without the HD problem.
I wonder if we maybe also could hear from some of you from the more Eastern European countries.
Yes.
Input from your chairs or from your positions there.
Well, I can.
Please,
Alberta. No, Alberta, go ahead.
Oh, I just have a small comment. I had a talk with my colleagues from Prague, and I know that it's a very different situation if you are living in the village, countryside, or in the city. In the city, it's more difficult, and I think it's also partly what we see in Germany, that if you are talking to a patient, you need to be very practical. I had a call today when the patient was asking, what is this daily routine, what everybody's talking about? So I think it's really important to say, you need to get up, you need to maybe have a call to your family, maybe you just open the window, do some breathing exercises, and just how to structure the day. And I think this is really important, and I think this is important for the people in the cities to survive this difficult situation and the tension that is created in the apartments, that the people are living like on 60 square meters, 3 or 4 of them, what is not so unusual in a lot of European cities, I think. So,
shall I tell you something? In Cyprus, for example, we have volunteer organizations that they can go to the patients and give food and pharmacies. This is a very nice action because people, as Beta said, need specific help. So we try to call them and ask them, everybody, do you need something? And cooperate with the other services and volunteer organization is very important.
I just want to add about the situation in Russia, Moscow, where we're based. So far, we've got over 6,000 confirmed cases of COVID-19 in Russia, and the majority of cases are still in Moscow. However, I mean, the majority of population is following the self-isolation practice. However, the outpatient clinic is still open for the urgent cases. And also we do continue in my institution, we do continue visits for the generation HD1. So for instance, next week, I'm going to have 2 visits for this clinical trial. Of course, we're following all the rules to prevent or to minimize the risk of being infected. But really, I mean, patients and their caregivers are really concerned, and being very cautious. However, I really appreciate the activity of our patients organization, because basically they're hosting on a weekly basis, every Monday, video sessions with a physiotherapist and ergotherapist, and every Friday with a psychologist. And I believe this is a very nice, I mean, they started to do this even before the COVID-19 situation. But I believe in the current circumstances, this is a really good support for them to be engaged in their at least some social activity. So I'm not sure yet how will the COVID-19 situation progress in our country, but at least currently this is how's it.
I would like to say some words what is the situation in Hungary. Until now, we have a relatively low number of infected cases, but we have strict preventative regulations, and it is already the 3rd week when we have the restriction at the outpatient clinics. But we are offering for all our patients, if they feel that we can prevent any persistent health problem, they can come anytime. But we are offering also the online service, and we are calling everybody. They just can drop an email or call us. And then we have not only the phone call, but also similar like this webinar. So we offer also the Zoom option. And then in this case, it's a type of telemedicine, and we can see also if they need some change in the medication. And when we see that there is a big problem, then we are still offering the inpatients clinic. We have a clean inpatients clinic. It's very far from the center where the COVID patients are. So if they need, for example, the page or something which is an invasive, then we can offer for them. but I see that they are very much frightened. So they really do not want to have the contact, and we try to solve all the problems on the telemedicine way. And our psychologist offers them the crisis intervention. So if they need, they can call the psychologist. So we are offering another option for the psychological intervention.
Mm-hmm. How is it like in Belgium, Dirk?
I think we are very fortunate that our lockdown is only partial, you know, and that means that people can go out, probably like in some other countries, for medical visits, for getting some food at the stores, and last but not least, for any physical activity. And it's, as you said before, perhaps one of the advantages of this crisis is that I see that it gives opportunities. When I go out and at the streets, I only see people jogging, people cycling, people taking a walk. And I think because it's the only thing that is allowed outside the door, I think many people are deciding to do things that they wouldn't do when they could sit at home and do whatever they wanted. And I see a really big increase in physical activity. And so it's one of the things that we encourage with all our patients at home. Go out, go outside, take a walk, do some physical activity, even if you're not used to, or even if it wasn't an activity that you did before. Now, within our houses, we are, let's say, we are quite afraid that there are happening a lot of things that we don't know of. And those that we can reach by phone or that we can reach by telecommunication are those people who are acquainted with our services. And I think that if we look beyond the crisis, or after the corona crisis will vanish, I'm afraid that we will see a lot of problems then emerging at that time, and it's difficult to get a good view of what is going on in many many families, especially those who are of the avoiding type. But I think in Belgium, because of the partial lockdown, we are lucky, and also for clinical visits, we are allowed to see people with the measurements that are at stake for everyone, meaning social physical distancing, washing hands, looking out for symptoms. But beyond that, in the beginning, the first 2 weeks, let's say the first 3 weeks of March, we were very, let's say, to the point, and we canceled nearly every clinical visit. But now, with more, let's say, needs, we try to take it a little bit easier within, of course, the measurements taken.
I would like to pose a general question to the panelists. In such an extreme situation, I mean, it's affecting the whole globe. Every country has this, and it's in the news all the time. And so many things are happening. It's like a war in a way. They are always telling us that we have never taken so strong measures since the war. And that can cause a lot of fear. And I guess fear and anger and stress are very related and strong feelings. And I wonder if you could give some general, very concrete advice, as Alsbeta said, very concrete. How can I deal with that fear if that's something that's affecting me or somebody in my family? Ramona?
In fact, if you just respect the instructions, so not touching the one who gets the disease, and trying to clean and wash your hands several times, and to have a mask even in simple tissue like that, because if you don't have any mask, because this is one of the problems in France, we have not enough masks for the number of doctors and patients. But if you do all these instructions, you are not very much at risk. And clearly the problem is if you are in a zone where there is a lot of COVID, then you have to be confined home and not move and stay home. And if you stay home, nothing will happen. You don't have any risk. The question is, if you don't put your mask, if you are not cleaning your hand, if you are not washing your hand 1,000 times a week, you might have some troubles. But if you do all this stuff, you limit very much the risk. So it's very important to know that the risk is avoidable. It's not something you cannot avoid. You may avoid it. Sometimes you're unlucky, but usually, if everything is clean, it's okay.
Okay, thank you. Other advice?
I think it's okay. Oh, sorry. I think it's also very important because sometimes the patients are asking us, can I even go out? Because they are even afraid to go out. They are aware of all these recommendations. But I think there is still important to keep going and not to lose the contact, and even to say, okay, all these recommendations are important, but even with these recommendations, you can go out, you can have a walk, if you go alone, if you keep the distance. So I think it's also very important to keep these advices to do physical activity, to move yourself. That's important. Even because they are more afraid, if I go out, is it not going to be like the last walk for me? So you need to also say, also there is a risk, but still this risk is very low if you keep on recommendations. Yes.
And also, sorry, one of the things, and I insist, it's to be very selective with the information source, to really decide and just to hear and see and read accurate and official information, because it's incredible the crazy conspiracy theories and crazy ideas that really are thrown at your face every day. And this will increase the fear and the feeling scared. So really be really selective with the information and the sources of information. That is crucial, in my opinion, and the associations need to have a really, really important role with that, with spreading the right information.
I can share,
yes.
I can share some
sorry.
of our, sorry, I think
No, Ramona, go ahead.
I was going to share some of our one of our experience in Romania, just to have a positive spin on things, because I think quite a few of you mentioned finding the positive in this unpleasant situation everyone is in. So I think because of the total lockdown in Romania at the moment, we had to cancel clinics, and hospitals are quarantined, and especially where we used to see patients in our MDT clinic, we can't do that anymore because of the location and a number of other things. But I think one of the difficulties the patients mentioned in the past is they had trouble traveling to where our clinic was, because Romania is quite big and our clinic is quite unique in that sense. But now, because of the situation we're in, we considered something we didn't really consider before, just do online clinics. and set up Zoom clinics where we actually get to speak to the patients, and people that wanted to come to our clinic before now have the option to just go online and have a chat with the psychiatrist and the neurologist or myself and other colleagues. So it's something we didn't think before. We weren't exactly planning for it or considering it, but I think, again, finding something positive in this situation is definitely something we try to do. And I think we will definitely do it even more so in the future, now that we know it's working and it's actually so helpful for people that are remote or have difficulty for whatever reason to travel to the clinic. So this is us, I think, being closer than we were before. That's my impression anyway, our team's impression.
Thank you. Dirk, you wanted to say something, I think?
I have a question. May I?
Please, yes.
I would like to ask Bernhard or many or others doctors about molecular therapies. For example, Roche clinical trials. How about it? Are they continued or stopped or suspended? How is it?
Well, the official direction by the sponsors and the guidance given by the European Medicinal Agency is that one should weigh the risks and the benefits in an appropriate fashion. And that is depending on local circumstance and on patient characteristics. There's no doubt that Huntington's is a grave disorder with its own severe impact. If you happen to be a young HD patient, and luckily, that's why I stressed the age relationship so much, that works for a change in favor of the HD patients. We are not talking Parkinson's disease patients or Alzheimer's disease patients who are in their 70s or 80s for the majority of HD patients. So I think, plus the local clinics need, if they are allowed by their regulatory bodies and by the local hospital. I mean, you just mentioned that you cannot see any clinical trials because the government in this region has decided to stop all clinical trials activities except for COVID-19 related clinical trials. So in this circumstance, there is a pause needed. I don't think that a pause in a long-term treatment that we are considering for the antisense trials currently ongoing is by default a disaster. And there may be the chance that the study will be prolonged, and because of the pause imposed on many of the centers, the study will run not for 2 years as originally planned, but rather for 2.5 years. Plus, I think it's very important for an HD affected who obviously put a lot of hope into trial participation to realize that skipping one dose, which is normally given every second or every fourth month, is not the end of the world, provided that the treatment will continue. So I think it's important that people don't get too worked up about the fact that they cannot receive their experimental treatment. I'm not implying that this is a good thing that it happens, but it's not the end of the world either. And so I think that's important to keep in mind. And the third thing, that's again a judgment thing that needs to be negotiated between the clinical site and the patients and their relatives, is what are the local circumstances? So do you have to get into a crowded hospital where you by default get exposed just by walking in to a lot of potential contamination? Or is it at a distant place where it is quiet, where you can control the flow of people and so on and so forth? So a lot has to do with local judgment, and we are all asked to come up with our best judgment as to what makes sense and is reasonable in the interest of an appropriate risk-benefit ratio.
Thank you. There is another one in the Q&A session. I think relates to something that may be relevant for a lot of people. It said here, my mom has HD. She's worried when we get out to have the important things for home. And I noted that it has affected on cooking and focus generally. So what should I do? So I guess these kind of obsessions or really worries or really hang-ups on things because of the changes in your maybe access to things because people have bought it in and the shops are empty. Are there any general advice you can give in this situation or in other similar situations?
And maybe this is a little bit similar to another question. Do you have any tips specific to people who are taking care of a family member with HD and experience increased stress due to the extra care that is needed?
Well, if I may attempt an answer. So, I think you alluded to something very important. The lack of routine, the concerns, the increased in anxiety over the new situation is deeply disturbing. I think we all understand. But there's only so much we can do about it. It's currently a fact of life. Likewise, this additional stress for the caregiver. We would love to avoid it, but I mean, it's a little bit like you having 3 small children at home. That's no fun if you're together with them on a 24/7 and need to keep them entertained somehow. But it's currently a fact of life. And it's the challenge to us, I would say, for the caregiver. And then that we try to take it with a grain of humor and to try to make the best out of a bad situation and not to add to our problems by obsessing about the fact that the situation is bad. That's of limited help, of course, if I'm saying this, but I'm aware. But at the same time, I think it's currently a fact of life that there are constraints and that there are risks. And in general, I think all humans, including HD-affected people, can adjust to realities. That these are realities, and we have to deal with them and try to make the best out of it. Not saying that that is easy, but that's the challenge we have. And maybe some of the psychologists can, or the psychiatrist can extend on what people can do to be better prepared to deal with these realities and the stresses that result from an unpleasant reality.
May I add? Oh, excuse me. I would like to combine a few comments from, for instance, you, Asbeta, and then Philippa also, and Catherine. I think that nothing is as contagious as anxiety. You know, listen to people who are anxious is almost impossible not to get anxious yourself. So I think it's important that we, certainly for HD patients, that we keep things simple, and that seeking out for more explanations, more information is at a certain point very counterproductive. So I would strongly recommend, taking the words of Anne-Catherine with some positive and some optimistic view, that there are not that many things that we need to know. One, you need to keep your distance. You have to stay at home, if not necessarily for displacements. You need to wash your hands. You need to avoid contact with sick people. And then after that, I think we need to try and explain to people that the risk of getting corona infection, and the risk that you get very sick is in fact very limited. But that's not that easy to communicate, because I just want to share you an experience this weekend. Our politicians on television were very upset by the scientist who told us that the curve was a little bit flattening, and they were very afraid that the slightest positive news would get people to get nonchalant and to stop doing what they need to do. And I think that is one of the worst things nowadays, that is nobody is allowed to be a little bit positive or a little bit because everyone is anxious that it would lead to leave all the measurements that are so needed for. And I think that is something, together with the fact that we need to be very clear and get to the fundamental, not too much information. I think that is one of the things that is indeed, Bernhard, that I agree with you. We need to try and be positive. The facts are not that dangerous, but it's a difficult issue, I know.
Thank you. Alspeta, I'm aware of time because we are now running a little bit over, but maybe Alspeta, you were about to comment?
I was about to comment that I encourage all the time the families, if you are able to talk, communicate in the family, talk about your feelings, and you can also say to one that you are caring of, I have enough, I cannot, I need a break, I need like 1 hour per day to recover, to have enough energy to care of you again. And sometimes it's really helpful if those ones know my caregiver or my partner needs a break. So sometimes it's useful just to talk about these thoughts and stress. It also helped in my family.
So it's a general advice to all of us, I guess. Yeah.
Last remark, only a quick remark. If any of the people that are listening to us feel that someone in their families or their HD patients are having some medical problem, don't be afraid to go to the hospital. You have to go to the hospital, okay? Because we are seeing that a lot of people are not coming because they are afraid to get infected with coronavirus. And we are seeing that the strokes, the heart attacks, and a lot of problems like falls, broken bones, some of these people are staying at home, and it is safe. It is safer to come to the hospital rather than staying at home with such an emergency. Okay, so don't be afraid to come to the hospital, even in Madrid or in Italy or in a place that there is a big emergency with COVID. The relative risk of yourself having a big problem with COVID is very small compared to not going to the hospital for other reasons. So take that into account.
Thank you.
But I think this is important also to mention that you're not obliged to go to the emergency unit if you got something, but to have a direct access to your own neurologist, who will tell you where to go to avoid being at the emergencies where you might encounter a lot of COVID patients. So in many hospitals, there are different circuits, different pathways, one for the COVID negative, one for the COVID positive. And if you are COVID negative, you can go directly with your neurologist to the one where you won't be in contact with COVID patients. It's feasible.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Mm-hmm. So I think we are about to have to round up. I don't know if there are any
Astri,
final short comments.
No, I was just curious. We didn't talk about Norway as of yet, and Lasse is on the call and you are on the call. How is it like in Norway?
So thank you. I think we are still not as burdened as many of the other European countries. We have, of course, postponed or transferred to teleconference all outpatient clinic visits. But as Jose just mentioned, we are still admitting patients with other conditions into the hospitals, and that feels safe in my opinion. It's very quiet in the hospital now. I was on call tonight, and there are hardly any patients coming in for other conditions. So just like Jose, I'm a bit worried about all those strokes and other emergencies that we are currently not seeing. With the HD patients, I think communication over telephone is going quite well, but I'm concerned about all those who are not able to be physically active without support from physiotherapy or rehabilitation institutions. And many of them are wondering how long this will last. And I really hope that as soon as possible, it could be some estimates could come out about when these services will be back, because I think also the uncertainty about the future is a burden to many of our patients.
Okay, thank you so much. It's not so easy to summarize all that's been discussed and talked about today, but I think what I have taken home is that the risk for HD patients is not relatively very much higher than in the general population. We should, of course, follow the general advice that we are given from our authorities. We should talk about whatever stress we experience in this situation, and we should try to limit maybe what kind of information we take in if it makes us more stressed or scared, and take care of each other and take care of ourselves. And I want to thank you so much again to all the panelists and to all the participants and for the comments and questions you have dropped us. And take care. And we have recorded this, so it will be made available on our webpage and also via the European Reference Network, of course, who has kindly done this from the technical and support side. So thank you so much, everybody, and take care.
Take care.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks to everyone.
Okay, bye.
Thank you.